Hey guys, so it's Friday, March 20th, and I wanted you guys to see Finn. Finn, say hi. See? He said hi. He said, hi, Mrs. Potter's third grade class. Okay, get down. So I hope you guys are all doing well, and I've been kind of thinking about some stuff. I was thinking about the question you guys would always ask me is what was my favorite part of the day? And remember, I would joke with you and I would say, well, it was 3:25, of course. And then you'd be like, Mrs. Potter. And I'm like, no, it really isn't. So I've been thinking about that. And I thought, you know what my favorite part of the day was? I always loved when you guys would come in and we kind of get settled down and you guys would hand me your spelling for the day and I'd pay you for planner. But then we would talk about what we did that night, the previous night. And I miss hearing about your basketball games or Ivy's tumbling or, I know a lot of you guys had basketball games and I always enjoyed listening to you explain your games and how many points you made or if you won or you lost. And I kind of miss talking about the Jazz, how they kept losing. And anyway, so I just wanted to tell you about my night last night. So Mr. Potter and I were going to sit down and watch a movie because there's not much to do. Can't really leave in the evenings anymore. And so we were about to watch a movie and we both kind of said, hey, we should play Mario Kart. Because we bought that game just for something to do, break up the monotony of the day. So Mr. Potter and I played Mario Kart last night and I won. I won a game. I was so excited because I'm not really a gamer. And then he went on and beat me about 10 times. But it was super fun. And so I hope you guys did something fun and you can email me and tell me what you did last night because I do. That is definitely the part that I miss the most is hearing what you guys were doing, what you were looking forward to this weekend. But anyway, so I hope you guys have a good weekend. I hope you're doing well on your homework. Let's hope that this doesn't last for too much longer. Fingers crossed, right? Okay, so let's get back to our book, Edward. So as you remember in chapter 17, the boy, Bryce, he takes Edward from kind of the scarecrow looking thing and he gives it to his sister whose name is Sarah Ruth. And remember, she's really sick and he starts to play his harmonica for her. So anyway, so this is chapter 18. Can you see that? Kind of looks like a little bit of a treasure box. Uh-oh, I just lost my place. Just a minute. Okay, here we go. Bryce and Sarah Ruth had a father. Early the next morning, when the light was gray and uncertain, Sarah Ruth was sitting up in bed, coughing, and the father came home. He picked Edward up by one of his ears and said, I ain't never. It's a baby doll, said Bryce. Don't look like no baby doll to me. Edward, hanging by one ear, was frightened. This, he was certain, was the man who crushed the heads of China dolls. Jangles, said Sarah Ruth between coughs. She held out her arms. He's hers, said Bryce. He belongs to her. The father dropped Edward on the bed, and Bryce picked up the rabbit and handed him to Sarah Ruth. It don't matter anyway, said the father. It don't make no difference, none of it. It does matter, said Bryce. Don't you sass me, said the father. He raised his hand and slapped Bryce across his mouth, and then he turned and left the house. You ain't got to worry about him, said Bryce to Edward. He ain't nothing but a bully. And besides, he don't hardly ever come home. Fortunately, the father did not come back that day. Excuse me. Bryce went out to work, and Sarah Ruth spent the day in bed holding Edward in her lap and playing with a box filled with buttons. Pretty, she said to Edward as she lined up the buttons on the bed and arranged them into different patterns. Sometimes, when a coughing fit was particularly bad, she squeezed Edward so tight that he was afraid he would crack in two. Also, in between coughing fits, she took to sucking on one of the on one or the other of Edward's ears. Normally, Edward would have found intrusive, clinging behavior of this sort of very annoying. But there was something about Sarah Ruth. He wanted to take care of her. He wanted to protect her. He wanted to do more for her. At the end of the day, Bryce returned with a biscuit for Sarah Ruth and a ball of twine for Edward. Sarah Ruth held the biscuit in both hands and took small, tentative bites. You eat that all up, honey. Let me hold Jangle, said Bryce. Him and me got a surprise for you. Bryce took Edward off in a corner of the room, and with his pocket knife he cut off lengths of twine and tied them to Edward's arms and feet, and then tied the twine to two sticks of wood. See, all day I've been thinking about it, Bryce said. What we're going to do is make you dance. Sarah Ruth loves dancing. Mama used to hold on to her and dance her around the room. You eating that biscuit? Bryce called out to Sarah Ruth. Uh-huh, said Sarah Ruth. You hold on, honey. We got a surprise for you. Bryce stood up. Close your eyes, he told her. He took Edward over to the bed and said, Okay, you can open them now. Sarah Ruth opened her eyes. Dance, Jangles, said Bryce, and then, moving the strings with the sticks with one hand, Bryce made Edward dance and drop and sway, and the whole while at the same time, with his other hand, he held on to the harmonica and played a bright and lively tune. Sarah Ruth laughed. She laughed until she started to cough, and then Bryce laid Edward down and took Sarah Ruth in his lap and rocked her and rubbed her back. You want some fresh air? He asked her. Let's get you out of this nasty old air, huh? Bryce carried his sister outside. He left Edward lying on the bed and the rabbit staring up at the smoke-stained ceiling. Thought again about having wings. If he had them, he thought, he would fly high above the world to where the air was clear and sweet, and he would take Sarah Ruth with him. He would carry her in his arms. Surely so high above the world she would be able to breathe without coughing. After a minute, Bryce came back inside, still carrying Sarah Ruth. She wants you too, he said. Jangles, said Sarah Ruth. She held out her arms. So Bryce held Sarah Ruth, and Sarah Ruth held Edward, and the three of them stood outside. Bryce said, You got to look for falling stars. Them are the ones with magic. They were quiet for a long time, all three of them looking up at the sky. Sarah Ruth stopped coughing. Edward thought that maybe she had fallen asleep. There, she said, and she pointed to a star streaking through the night sky. Make a wish, honey, Bryce said, his voice high and tight. That's your star. You make you a wish for anything you want. And even though it was Sarah Ruth's star, Edward wished on it too. All right, guys. Well, I keep wondering how Edward's going to leave Bryce and Sarah Ruth, but I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope you do well on your comprehension test and your spelling test. And I miss you guys. I really do. So think about what your favorite part of the day was, and you can email that to me as well as what you're planning to do this weekend. I am probably going to be painting this weekend. Pretty exciting stuff. So, all right, we'll see you guys later. Bye.